The warning. The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched toward the artificial sky like a monument to peace itself. Its walls were constructed from living crystal that hummed with ancient power. Inside this grand chamber, representatives from 300 civilizations gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance. Today that gathering would change everything. Ambassador David Kane stood in the center of the vast circular floor. Around him, tier upon tier of seats rose up like an amphitheater, each occupied by beings of incredible diversity. Some had scales that glittered like precious gems. Others were clouds of sentient gas contained in transparent suits. A few existed partially in dimensions human eyes could not fully perceive. They were all older than humanity. They were all more advanced. And they were all watching him with barely concealed amusement. David was not an imposing figure. He was of average height with graying hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of careful diplomacy. He wore the simple dark blue uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps with no decorations except a small silver pin shaped like Earth. Behind him stood his aide, Captain Maria Santos, a military officer whose presence the council had already questioned twice. They did not understand why a diplomat would need a soldier beside him. They would understand soon enough. Supreme Chancellor Morvix presided over the assembly from the highest seat. He was Zenthari, a species that had mastered faster than light travel when humans were still learning to make fire. His body was tall and thin, covered in silver fur that rippled with bioluminescent patterns reflecting his emotions. Right now, those patterns showed calm confidence mixed with mild irritation. He had more important matters to attend to than this human presentation. Ambassador Kane, Morvix said, his voice amplified throughout the chamber without any visible technology. You have requested this emergency session. The Council has granted your request despite significant skepticism about the necessity. Please proceed with your evidence. David activated the holographic projector. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared above his head, slowly rotating. Red markers began appearing along the outer rim, dozens of them, then hundreds. 3 months ago, David began, his voice steady and clear, our deep space monitoring network detected unusual activity in Sector 447. Entire solar systems were going dark. Not destroyed. Not conquered. Simply empty. A Korvathi representative, a being resembling a crystalline mantis, clicked its mandibles in what its translator rendered as laughter. Ambassador, space is vast. Systems go quiet for countless mundane reasons. Equipment failures, solar interference, voluntary isolation. This hardly constitutes an emergency. David had expected this response. He had prepared for it. You are correct, Counselor Thex. That is why we investigated further. We sent survey ships, probes, remote drones. This is what they found. The hologram changed. The image now showed a planet. Or what had been a planet. The world was gray and lifeless, its atmosphere stripped away, its oceans evaporated, its continents reduced to dust. Massive gouges marked its surface as if something with unimaginable hunger had carved chunks from the crust itself. This was the colony world of New Harmony, David continued. Population, 42,000 humans. Along with 15,000 Draxian settlers who had been living there for 2 generations. The planet is now sterile. No life remains. Not even bacteria. Murmurs rippled through the council. Some representatives leaned forward with interest. Others exchanged glances. Most still looked unconvinced. A Draxian counselor, his reptilian features showing concern, spoke up. We received reports that New Harmony had experienced catastrophic volcanic activity. A natural disaster. That was the initial assessment, David acknowledged. Until we found 17 more worlds in the same condition. All along the outer rim. All stripped of life. All showing identical patterns of destruction. He changed the image again. This time it showed something moving through space. The quality was poor, the image grainy and distorted, but the shape was visible. It was organic. Massive. And it was feeding on a star. The chamber fell silent. We call them void walkers, David said quietly. They exist in the space between galaxies. They are not a civilization. They are not even truly individuals. They are a force of nature. A plague that consumes everything in its path. They have entered our galaxy and they are moving toward the core. Supreme Chancellor Morvix studied the image. His bioluminescent patterns shifted to show contemplation mixed with doubt. Ambassador Kane, this image is of very poor quality. Could be a natural phenomenon. A plasma cloud. A stellar anomaly. You are asking this council to accept extraordinary claims based on questionable evidence. David had known this would be difficult. The council members had lived in peace for thousands of years. They had advanced technology that solved most problems. They had forgotten what real danger looked like. "I have more evidence," David said. He gestured to Captain Santos, who stepped forward carrying a sealed container. 3 weeks ago, one of our scout ships encountered a small group of Void Walkers near the Terminus Nebula. The ship was destroyed, but not before it managed to deploy a military-grade recorder. This is what it captured. Captain Santos opened the container and inserted a data crystal into the holographic projector. The image that appeared made several council members recoil in their seats. The Void Walker was massive beyond comprehension. Its body was roughly cylindrical, covered in overlapping plates of dark matter that absorbed light. Hundreds of tendrils extended from its core, each 1,000s of kilometers long. It moved through space like a nightmare made real, its mouth opening to reveal layers of teeth made from crystallized gravity. Around it, smaller Void Walkers swarmed like parasites around a host. The recording showed the human scout ship trying to evade. It was fast, its engines pushing well beyond safety limits, but the Void Walker was faster. A tendril lashed out, moving at impossible speed and wrapped around the ship. The hull began to crumple. Then the recording cut to static. The silence in the chamber was profound. No one laughed now. No one dismissed the threat. But David could see something else in their faces. Not fear. Not urgency. Instead, he saw calculation. He saw pride. He saw the same arrogance that had doomed countless civilizations throughout history. It was Counselor Thex who spoke first. "This is certainly disturbing. However, Ambassador Kane, these creatures, these Void Walkers appear to be biological. Our weapons technology is far beyond anything required to neutralize a biological threat, no matter how large." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. David felt his patience wearing thin. "With respect, Counselor, you are underestimating the threat. These creatures have consumed entire galaxies. They do not think like we do. They do not have technology, but they have adapted to survive in the harshest environments imaginable. Energy weapons are absorbed by their dark matter hides. Kinetic weapons pass through them as if through water. Conventional tactics are useless." A Veloxian representative, her scales shimmering with colors that indicated annoyance, spoke up. "Then what do you propose, Ambassador? What can primitive human weapons accomplish that our advanced technology cannot?" There it was. The word David had been waiting for. Primitive. "We propose a coordinated defense," David said carefully. "Humanity has experience fighting asymmetric threats. We have weapons that, while less elegant than yours, are extremely effective at massive destruction. Nuclear warheads. Antimatter charges. Gravitational collapse devices. We request permission to deploy these weapons in collective space to establish a defensive perimeter." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Council members began shouting. Some stood from their seats. Others activated their translation devices to maximum volume to be heard over the chaos. Supreme Chancellor Morvix struck his staff against the floor. The sound rang out like a thunderclap, silencing the chamber. "Order. We will have order." When the noise subsided, Morvix turned his attention to David. His bioluminescent patterns now showed clear disapproval. "Ambassador Kane, are you seriously suggesting that we allow humans to bring weapons of mass destruction into collective space? Weapons that are banned under 17 separate treaties? Weapons that your own species nearly used to annihilate yourselves?" "I am suggesting that survival is more important than treaties," David replied. "The Void Walkers are 3 months away from the first core worlds. When they arrive, your energy shields and plasma weapons will not stop them. But our weapons might. If we work together." A Korvathi elder, his crystalline body reflecting rainbow patterns, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "The humans speak of cooperation, but what they truly seek is an excuse to militarize, to expand their influence, to make us dependent on their barbaric weapons. This council has maintained peace for 10,000 years without resorting to such crude methods." Other counselors voiced agreement. David heard the words savage, dangerous, untrustworthy repeated in various languages. He felt Captain Santos tense beside him. He could sense her anger, her frustration at watching these so-called advanced beings dismiss a threat that could destroy them all. "I am calling for a vote," Supreme Chancellor Morvix announced. "The question before the Council is simple. Do we grant humans permission to deploy their restricted weapons in collective space for defensive purposes?" David watched as the voting indicators appeared around the chamber. Red lights for no. Blue lights for yes. The red lights began appearing immediately. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The blue lights were few and scattered. Species that had worked with humans before. Species that had seen humanity's capacity for both destruction and protection. The final count was displayed in the center of the chamber. 273 votes against. 27 votes in favor. Supreme Chancellor Morvix looked down at David with an expression that might have been pity. The motion is rejected. Furthermore, by majority consensus, this council hereby bans all human military vessels from entering collective space. Your defensive perimeter, as you call it, will remain behind your own borders. The collective will handle any potential threats using our own methods and our own technology. David stood very still. He had expected rejection, but a complete military ban was worse than he had anticipated. Supreme Chancellor, I urge you to reconsider. The Void Walkers do not care about your laws or your borders. When they come, and they will come, you will need every weapon available. When they come, Morvix said, his tone making it clear he still had doubts, the collective will respond appropriately. But we will not abandon 10,000 years of peace and progress because of human paranoia. This session is concluded. The council members began filing out. Some glanced at David with contempt. Others with something like sympathy. Most simply ignored him, already moving on to matters they considered more important. Within minutes, the great chamber was empty except for David, Captain Santos, and a handful of automated cleaning drones. They are fools, Captain Santos said quietly. They will get billions killed. They are not fools, David replied, his voice tired. They are overconfident. There is a difference. They have lived in peace for so long that they have forgotten what real danger looks like. They think their technology makes them invincible. So what do we do now? David looked up at the crystal ceiling, at the artificial stars embedded in the material. We go home. We prepare our defenses. And we wait. For what? For the screaming to start. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. During that time, David sent encrypted messages to the Terran High Command. The messages were brief but clear. The Council had refused help. Humanity was on its own. Directive Omega was authorized. Directive Omega was a protocol that humanity had hoped never to use. It was a complete militarization of human space. Every shipyard would be converted to military production. Every able-bodied citizen would receive combat training. Every weapon humanity had ever conceived, no matter how terrible, would be manufactured and stockpiled. When David arrived at Earth, he found the planet already transforming. Orbital platforms that had been used for scientific research were being retrofitted with weapons. Civilian ships were being armored and armed. The asteroid mining facilities in the belt were now producing warheads instead of construction materials. General Alexander Petrov met David at the Lunar Command Center. He was a massive man with a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much combat. The Council rejected our proposal, he stated. It was not a question. They did more than that, David said. They banned our military from collective space entirely. We are prisoners in our own territory. Petrov's expression did not change. Then we build our walls high and hope they hold. It will not be enough, David said. The Void Walkers will tear through the outer rim colonies like paper. Millions will die before they even reach collective space. And when they do, when the Council finally realizes they cannot stop them, they will call for our help. But by then it might be too late. So we wait and watch our neighbors die? David walked to the window. Earth hung below them, beautiful and blue and fragile. We wait. But we do not watch passively. I want monitoring stations placed along every major approach to collective space. I want our fastest ships ready to deploy at a moment's notice. And I want every diplomatic channel kept open. When they call, we answer immediately. You sound certain they will call. They will call, General. Pride is not stronger than survival. The question is whether any of them will be left alive when they finally swallow that pride. The weeks passed. Then months. And along the outer rim, colonies continued to disappear. Human colonies. Draxian settlements. Korvathi mining operations. The Void Walkers did not discriminate. They simply consumed everything in their path. The collective sent investigative teams. Then defensive fleets. Then evacuation ships. Nothing worked. Every fleet that engaged the Void Walkers was destroyed. Every world they tried to defend was stripped bare. The death toll climbed into the millions, then the tens of millions. And still the collective did not call. David sat in his office on Luna and watched the reports come in. Each one was worse than the last. Each one confirmed what he had tried to tell the Council. The Void Walkers were not an enemy that could be negotiated with or deterred by superior technology. They were a force of nature, ancient and hungry and unstoppable by conventional means. Captain Santos entered his office carrying another data pad. "Sir, we just received word. The Void Walkers have reached the Zenthri outer colonies. Supreme Chancellor Morvix's home system." David looked up sharply. "Casualties?" "Unknown. The Zenthri deployed their entire 7th Fleet to defend it. 300 ships. The most advanced in the collective." "And?" Captain Santos's expression was grim. "Silence. Complete communications blackout. Either they are winning and too busy to report, or—" She did not need to finish the sentence. They both knew what silence meant in this war. David stood and walked to the window again. Out there, beyond the moon, beyond Earth, beyond human space, people were dying. Civilizations were falling. And humanity could do nothing but watch and wait. But David Kane was not a man who waited passively. He activated his secure communication terminal and sent one final message to Supreme Chancellor Morvix. The message was simple: "When you are ready to accept help, we will be here. Humanity does not abandon its neighbors, even neighbors who have abandoned us. We will answer your call. We will fight beside you. All you have to do is ask." He sent the message knowing it might be ignored, knowing it might arrive too late. But he sent it anyway, because that was what humans did. They offered help even when it was refused. They stood ready even when they were unwanted. They prepared to fight even when they were told to stand down. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's warnings. They had mocked human weapons. They had banned human ships from their space. Soon, very soon, they would learn the price of that arrogance. And when they did, humanity would be ready to answer the call. The recording of the Void Walker attack played on repeat in David's mind. The massive creature wrapping around that scout ship. The tendrils crushing metal like paper. The screams that had been cut short. He had shown them the evidence. He had warned them of the danger. He had offered humanity strength in defense of all. They had laughed. Soon the laughter would stop. And the screaming would begin. The reckoning. The distress signal reached Earth at 0300 hours, Galactic Standard Time. It was not the carefully worded diplomatic message that Ambassador David Kane had been expecting. It was a raw, unencrypted emergency broadcast that overrode every communication channel in human space. "This is Supreme Chancellor Morvix of the Zenthri hegemony to any vessels capable of rendering aid. The Zenthri homeworld is under attack. The Void Walkers have breached our defensive perimeter. Our fleets are destroyed. Our shields are failing. We are requesting immediate military assistance from any and all collective member species. Repeating, this is an emergency broadcast. We need help. Please. Anyone. Help us." The message played on loop. David listened to it 3 times in the command center beneath Luna's surface. Each repetition was worse than the last because he could hear the change in Morvix's voice. The first broadcast still held traces of pride, of authority. By the third, there was only desperation and fear. General Petrov stood beside him, arms crossed over his massive chest. "The mighty Zenthri are begging. I never thought I would hear that in my lifetime." "Neither did they," David replied quietly. "How many collective species have responded to the distress call?" "None. Our monitoring stations show no fleet movements toward Zenthri space. They are all pulling back, reinforcing their own borders. Everyone is hoping the Void Walkers will be satisfied with one homeworld and move on." David felt something cold settle in his chest. The collective was abandoning the Zenthri. These species who had maintained peace for 10,000 years were now willing to let an entire civilization die rather than risk their own forces. It was the ultimate proof that their unity had been built on comfort and prosperity, not on genuine loyalty or courage. "Scramble the Terran Defense Fleet," David ordered. "Full deployment. Every available ship." Petrov did not move. "Ambassador, the collective banned our military vessels from their space. If we cross that border, we will be in violation of galactic law. They could declare us hostile invaders." "Let them," David said, his voice hard. "I would rather be called an invader than stand by while billions die. Give the order, General." Petrov smiled. It was a grim smile, but genuine. "Yes, sir. I will lead the fleet personally." "No," David said. "I will." Petrov's eyebrows rose. "With respect, Ambassador, you are a diplomat, not a military commander. I am the one who showed them the evidence. I am the one who warned them. I am the one who offered our help and was refused. If humanity is going to break their laws to save them, then I am going to be the one who does it. Besides," David's expression softened slightly, "someone needs to be there to accept Morvix's surrender." "His surrender? Of his pride, General. Of his arrogance. Sometimes that is the hardest surrender of all. Within the hour, 200 Terran warships launched from various positions around human space. They were not elegant like collective vessels. They were blocky and utilitarian, covered in armor plating and weapon emplacements. They had been designed by a species that knew war intimately. A species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The flagship was the TSS Indomitable, a battlecruiser that carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. David stood on the bridge as they entered faster than light travel, watching the stars stretch into lines of light. Captain Chin, the Indomitable's commanding officer, approached him with a data pad. "Ambassador, we have the tactical situation from our long-range sensors. It is not good." The holographic display activated, showing the Zenthari home system. David had visited it once during diplomatic negotiations. It had been beautiful. 7 planets orbiting a golden sun, with the homeworld positioned perfectly in the habitable zone. Orbital stations and defensive platforms had surrounded it like a crown of metal and light. Now it was a battlefield. The defensive platforms were gone. The orbital stations were destroyed or abandoned. And surrounding the homeworld itself were the Void Walkers. Hundreds of them. Some were small, only a few kilometers long. Others were massive, their bodies stretching across thousands of kilometers of space. The largest one, the Alpha that David had shown to the Council, had wrapped itself around one of the system's outer planets. As they watched, the planet began to crack. The Void Walker was feeding on its core, consuming the very matter that held the world together. "Estimated time to complete planetary consumption?" David asked. 4 hours for the outer planet, Captain Chin replied. "The homeworld itself has maybe 12 hours before the atmosphere is stripped. After that, the biosphere dies in minutes." "And the Zenthari fleet?" Chen's expression grew even grimmer. "There is no fleet, Ambassador. Look at the debris field." David looked. The hologram zoomed in on the space surrounding the homeworld. What he had initially taken for asteroids or natural debris was actually the remains of ships. Thousands of ships. The entire Zenthari defensive armada had been shredded and scattered across millions of kilometers. "They tried to fight," Chin said quietly. "They died bravely. But their weapons could not hurt the Void Walkers. Their shields could not stop them. It was a slaughter." David thought about Supreme Chancellor Morvix. About his confidence. About his certainty that collective technology would be sufficient. About how he had dismissed human weapons as primitive and barbaric. "How long until we arrive?" 3 hours at maximum speed. Push the engines beyond maximum. I want to arrive in 2 hours. And prepare the special weapons. All of them." Chin hesitated. "Ambassador, if we use those weapons there is no going back. The collective will know we have been developing banned technology. They will brand us as war criminals. Captain, if we do not use those weapons, there will be no collective left to judge us. Prepare the weapons. That is an order." The Terran fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zenthari system. Immediately, alarms began blaring as sensors detected the Void Walkers. The creatures responded to the new arrivals with what might have been curiosity or hunger. It was impossible to tell which. David activated the communication channel to all ships. "This is Ambassador David Kane to all Terran vessels. We are about to engage an enemy that has consumed galaxies. An enemy that the collective, with all their advanced technology, could not stop. But we are not the collective. We are humanity. And we do not lose." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Our weapons are primitive. Our tactics are brutal. Our methods are savage. And that is exactly why we will win. The Void Walkers have never faced an enemy like us. They have never faced a species that spent 10,000 years learning every possible way to kill. Today we teach them fear." The fleet roared forward. Not in the careful formations that collective fleets used. Not with the measured precision of civilized warfare. They charged like ancient cavalry, engines burning at maximum, weapons armed and ready. The Void Walkers turned to meet them. Tendrils lashed out across impossible distances. The first 3 human ships were caught and crushed before they could react. The crews died instantly, their vessels reduced to scrap metal. But the remaining ships did not slow down. They did not retreat. They accelerated. "All ships," David commanded. "Launch nuclear warheads. Maximum yield. Saturation pattern." 200 ships opened their missile bays simultaneously. Thousands of nuclear warheads launched, each one carrying destructive power that the collective had banned centuries ago. The missiles streaked through space, their engines leaving trails of light. The Void Walkers did not evade. They had faced energy weapons before. They had learned to absorb or deflect them. These primitive projectiles did not seem dangerous. That was their first mistake. The warheads detonated in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Nuclear fire bloomed across the void. The Void Walkers screamed. It was not a sound that traveled through space. It was something felt in the mind, a psychic shriek of pain and surprise. The smaller Void Walkers at the edge of the swarm simply ceased to exist, vaporized by temperatures hotter than stars. The larger ones survived, but their dark matter hides were scorched and burned. For the first time in their ancient existence they had been hurt. Antimatter torpedoes, David ordered. Target the wounded ones. Do not give them time to regenerate. The second wave launched. Antimatter warheads, each one carrying destructive potential that could annihilate entire cities. When matter met antimatter, the result was total conversion to energy. Pure destruction with no waste, no mercy, no survivors. The torpedoes struck home. More Void Walkers died, their massive bodies torn apart at the molecular level. The swarm began to pull back, repositioning to protect the alpha creature that was still feeding on the outer planet. They are adapting, Captain Chin reported. Forming defensive clusters. Using the smaller ones as shields. Then we adapt too, David said. All ships switch to kinetic bombardment. Railgun batteries, maximum rate of fire. Aim for the alpha. The Terran ships closed to medium range. Their railguns began firing. Simple metal slugs accelerated to relativistic speeds. No explosives. No complex technology. Just mass and velocity converted into kinetic energy. The projectiles punched through the Void Walkers like bullets through flesh. The smaller creatures tried to intercept them but were simply carried along, their bodies impaled on the metal slugs before being smashed into the creatures behind them. The Alpha, still wrapped around the dying planet, released its grip and turned to face the human fleet. It was massive beyond comprehension. Its mouth opened, revealing layers of crystallized gravity that could tear apart ships with tidal forces alone. All ships, David said quietly. Gravitational collapse devices. Fire on my mark. This was humanity's most terrible weapon. A device that created a microscopic black hole for a fraction of a second. Just long enough to disrupt the fabric of spacetime itself. The collective had banned it after a single test had nearly destroyed an entire star system. Humanity had built 300 of them. Mark. The devices fired simultaneously. Reality bent. Spacetime screamed. The Void Walker Alpha found itself caught in gravitational forces that even its ancient body could not withstand. Its tendrils were torn from its core. Its armor plates shattered. Its very matter was pulled apart atom by atom. The creature screamed again. This time, the psychic shriek was so powerful that every human in the fleet felt it. Pain, rage, fear. Emotions that this ancient being had never experienced before. And then it died. The Alpha Void Walker, the creature that had consumed worlds and stars, that had existed for billions of years, ceased to exist. Its body collapsed into itself, leaving only scattered particles drifting through space. The remaining Void Walkers fled. They did not retreat in an organized manner. They scattered in every direction, fleeing from the small metal ships that had done the impossible. For the first time in their existence, the Void Walkers ran. The Terran fleet did not pursue. They had achieved their objective. The Zenthari homeworld was safe. Barely but safe. David opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. This is Ambassador David Kane of the Terran Diplomatic Corps to Zenthari Planetary Command. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Please respond. Static. Then a voice, weak and shaking. It was Supreme Chancellor Morvix. Ambassador Kane. You came. After everything we said. After we banned your ships. You still came. Yes, David said simply. We came. There was a long silence. When Morvix spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Our sensors recorded the entire battle. We saw what your weapons did. We saw how you fought. The Council was wrong. I was wrong. Your methods are not savage. They are necessary. With respect, Supreme Chancellor, they are both. But sometimes savage is what survival requires. Another pause. Ambassador, I am transmitting a recording of the battle to every member of the collective. They need to see what you did here. They need to know that humanity saved us when no one else would. That is not necessary, Supreme Chancellor. It is absolutely necessary. The collective voted to ban your military from our space. They mocked your warnings. They dismissed your evidence. And then they abandoned us to die. But you came anyway. That recording will be my testimony before the Council. My proof that humanity deserves not just membership in the collective, but leadership. David felt the weight of those words. Leadership. It was what humanity had been denied since joining the collective. Always the junior species. Always the primitive newcomers. Always excluded from real power. Supreme Chancellor, we did not come here for recognition or power. We came because it was the right thing to do. I know, Morvix replied. That is exactly why you deserve both. The Terran fleet remained in Zenthari space for 3 days. They helped with rescue operations. They provided medical supplies. They assisted in clearing orbital debris and restoring communication networks. And all the while Morvix's recording spread through the collective. Every species saw it. The human ships charging into battle. The nuclear warheads detonating. The antimatter torpedoes striking home. The railgun bombardment. And finally, the gravitational collapse that killed the Alpha Void Walker. They saw the Terran fleet, primitive and brutal and absolutely effective, accomplishing what all the collective's advanced technology could not. The council convened an emergency session. This time, David was not alone on the speaking floor. Supreme Chancellor Morvix stood beside him, along with representatives from 7 other species whose worlds the Terran fleet had helped evacuate during the crisis. Councillor Thex, the Korvathi who had mocked humanity's weapons, spoke first. His crystalline body flickered with colors David had learned indicated shame. Ambassador Kane, on behalf of the Korvathi consensus, I formally apologize for my previous words. Your weapons are not primitive. They are practical. Your methods are not savage. They are effective. And your people are not barbaric. They are brave. Other councillors echoed similar sentiments. One by one they acknowledged their mistake. They admitted their arrogance. They recognized humanity's strength. But David noticed that some remained silent. The elder species. The ones who had held power in the collective for thousands of years. They did not apologize. They simply watched and calculated and worried about what humanity's new status would mean for their influence. When the apologies were finished, Morvix stepped forward. I am calling for a vote. First, to immediately lift the ban on human military vessels in collective space. Second, to grant humanity full access to all collective military councils and strategic planning committees. And third, to formally recognize Earth as a core world with all associated rights and privileges. The implications were enormous. Core world status meant humanity would have equal say with the eldest species. It meant human votes would carry the same weight as the Zenthari or the Korvathi or the Veloxians. The vote was called. This time, the blue lights outnumbered the red by a significant margin. The motion passed. David felt Captain Santos standing behind him. She leaned close and whispered, "We won." "No," David replied quietly. "We survived. There is a difference." Because David Kane knew something that the council was only beginning to realize. The Void Walkers had fled, but they had not been destroyed. They were still out there in the darkness between stars. They would regroup. They would adapt. They would return. And next time they would be ready for humanity's weapons. As the council session concluded and representatives began filing out, David remained on the speaking floor. He looked up at the crystal ceiling, at the artificial stars embedded there, and thought about the real stars beyond. About the threats that lurked in the vast darkness. About the battles yet to come. Supreme Chancellor Morvix approached him. The Zenthari leader looked older now, his bioluminescent patterns dimmer than before. Ambassador Kane, what you said earlier about your methods being both necessary and savage. Do you truly believe that? I do, David said. Humanity spent millennia fighting wars. We learned to be efficient killers. We learned to be brutal when we needed to be. That experience cost us millions of lives and centuries of suffering. But it also taught us how to survive against impossible odds. The collective traded that knowledge for peace and prosperity. That was a reasonable choice for you. But it left you vulnerable. Morvix was quiet for a long moment. So what happens now? Do humans become the military arm of the collective while we maintain our advanced technology and cultural achievements? Do we simply accept that we are no longer the dominant force in this galaxy? David smiled, but it was a sad smile. Supreme Chancellor, I do not think you understand. This is not about dominance. This is about survival. The Void Walkers are not the only threat out there. They are just the first one powerful enough to break through your defenses. There will be others. And when they come, the collective will need every advantage it can get. Human weapons. Zenthari technology. Korvathi strategy. All of it working together. And if we refuse to work together? If the elder species decide they would rather maintain their power than accept human leadership? David's smile faded. Then you will die. And humanity will remember you. And we will make sure that whatever comes after the collective learns from your mistakes. It was a harsh answer. A brutal answer. But it was honest. And after everything that had happened, Morvix appreciated the honesty. I will do everything in my power to ensure cooperation, Morvix said. The recording I sent out has changed many minds. But there will be resistance. Species who believe their way is superior. Who think that accepting human help is admitting weakness. Let them resist, David said. The Void Walkers will teach them the same lesson they taught you. The only question is whether they will learn before it is too late. David returned to Earth a week later. He expected to find celebrations, parades, recognition for humanity's triumph. Instead, he found General Petrov waiting for him with a grim expression. What is wrong? David asked. Long-range sensors have detected something, Petrov said. Beyond the galactic rim. Where the Void Walkers came from originally. What did they detect? Petrov handed him a data pad. David looked at the screen and felt his blood turn cold. The display showed the edge of the galaxy. And approaching from the intergalactic void were thousands of signals. Tens of thousands. Maybe hundreds of thousands. It was not an invasion, David said quietly. What we fought was a scouting force. The real swarm is still coming. How long do we have? 2 years. Maybe 3 if we are lucky. David thought about the council. About the species who had finally accepted humanity. About the unity they had achieved through shared trauma and desperate need. 2 years was not enough time to prepare. Not nearly enough. But it would have to be. General, recall all Terran forces to Sol system. Begin construction of the defensive perimeter we proposed to the council. And send a message to every member of the collective. Tell them the truth. The battle at Zenthri space was not the war. It was barely even the opening move. The real war is coming. And if we do not stand together, if we do not pool every resource and every weapon and every scrap of knowledge we possess, we will all die. And if they do not listen? David thought about Supreme Chancellor Morvix. About his pride and his certainty and his eventual desperate call for help. About how close the Zenthri had come to complete extinction. About the billions who had died because the collective refused to believe the warnings. Then we fight alone, David said. And we make the Void Walkers pay for every meter of space they take. We make them learn that humanity does not surrender. We do not give up. And we do not go quietly into extinction. Even if we cannot win? David smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had accepted terrible truths. General, humanity has been facing impossible odds since we learned to walk upright. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have ended us 1,000 times over. We are still here. Still fighting. Still refusing to die. That is what we do. That is what makes us human. He looked out the viewport at Earth below. Beautiful and blue and fragile. Home to 8 billion people who had no idea how close they had come to annihilation. How close they still were. The galaxy laughed at us, David continued. They mocked our warnings and banned our weapons and dismissed our evidence. But we saved them anyway. We showed them that sometimes primitive methods and brutal tactics are exactly what survival requires. Now they know. Now they believe. And when the real swarm arrives, they will fight beside us. And if it is not enough? If even working together we cannot stop them? David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, then we will die knowing we tried. That we fought with everything we had. That we refused to surrender even when surrender was the logical choice. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. Maybe our defiance will inspire some future species to keep fighting. To keep resisting. To never ever give up. He turned away from the viewport and walked toward the door. Come, General. We have a war to prepare for. And 2 years is not nearly enough time. As David left the command center, he thought about the recording he had shown the council. The Void Walker wrapping around that scout ship. The tendrils crushing metal. The screams that had been cut short. The council had seen it and dismissed it. They had laughed at human paranoia and fear. They were not laughing anymore. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity's warnings were not paranoia. Humanity's weapons were not primitive. And humanity's willingness to fight, to sacrifice, to stand against impossible odds, was not barbaric. It was survival. Pure and simple. And in the 2 years before the real swarm arrived, every species in the collective would learn that same lesson. The Galaxy Council had laughed at banning. They had mocked humanity's evidence. But they believed now. They believed because they had seen the recording. The recording of 200 human ships doing what thousands of collective vessels could not. They believed because they were still alive to believe. And that, David thought, was what mattered most.